So g'day everybody, my name is Matt Moe, and today I'm having a little chat with National Viticulturalist Manager Philip Deverell from Pernod Ricard Winemakers. Unfortunately, last week the Advanced Ag event down at the Convention Centre was cancelled in Adelaide, but we really thought it was still important to have this chat and put some of this information out into the sector just around their journey using the Deep Planet technology, which is a company using remote sensing, leveraging AI and machine learning to look at prediction of vine health, yield, maturity, monitoring at scale. Pernod Ricard has gone through a project with the technology over this last 2021 vintage, over 1,000 hectares from multiple regional locations, and Philip was the main lead contact with Deep Planet to run that trial. My personal involvement with the project is that I'm an independent consultant that is working with Deep Planet to help them connect their technology to the industry and get them to increase the acceleration of their technology. So as I said, for the past 12 months, I've been working with them in that remote sensing, AI, machine learning capacity, and Philip here has been one of the early adopters of the technology. Philip, do you just want to give us a quick rundown and background on yourself and what you do at Pernod Ricard and some of the challenges you face?
Sure. Thanks, Matt. Thank you for the invite to speak today. It's a subject I'm fairly passionate about, so it's good to talk about it to a wide audience. I've been with Pernod Ricard for 24 years. I've got to see most of the world and the operations, and there's some critical points that seem to crop up no matter what continent you're on, in terms of how much has the grower got in the vineyard, and when is it going to be ready for the winery to come in, and all the factors that influence that. So it's something that's been pretty clear across most of my career in terms of accurate yield estimation drives a whole bunch of factors around winery efficiency, quality, and return to the grower. So it's definitely something that we really want to understand as viticulturalists, and having more technology out there to do it in the different forms of going out and doing those traditional bunch and cluster counts and bunch weights, all those sorts of things we do in the growing season. If we could do it a better way, it would be fantastic.
Oh, that's really good background. So for the audience and at Advanced Ag, it would have been a good mix of people from across the startup community and the ag tech community, as well as other growers and so forth. Just as I guess as an international wine business and having had that 24 years experience there, just really interested in understanding how you guys sort of make decisions and what your innovation perhaps gate processes look like in terms of what technology you're going to investigate versus those you choose not to, and how you sort of make those decisions, and maybe from a Deep Planet perspective, what were the key drivers that got you guys excited to have a look at the technology?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a whole department of the company that's focused around the Industry 4.0 and driving better technology into the business and really making that step forward. And there's a group of people that we really have a working group, functional group around making these decisions. So it's really keeping abreast of that new technology and understanding that, looking what's happening in research and what's being taken research and being commercialized into an opportunity, but also having something that's being researched and delivered. How does that work in terms of connectivity with our current system? So it's wonderful to have this thing which is standalone. We have a number of systems embedded within the business, and any new system has to work with those, rather than having to do a whole bunch of bridging and kind of half measures to get things up and running. But it's very much a structured process in terms of you've got people there from all areas of the business that are involved in this. So whether it be from people that deal in grape supply, technical viticulture such as myself, all the way down to winery logistics, all those people are involved in the process, and we basically weigh up the strength, but also how that fits into our current systems, because that's important to us. It may be a very good package, but it becomes too complicated to integrate, you kind of lose the benefit of that system. So both efficiency and efficacy of the system, but also integration into our current systems.
Yeah, so that interoperability is a really big focus at the moment. I know that the Collaboraculture project is really looking at how startups and ag tech companies can work together and harmonise to be able to achieve that interoperability. So anyone watching, it's worth having a look at Collaboraculture. Just do a Google search, you'll find the information, and you can sign up to receive information on that. Because as you can hear from Philip, as one of the national big players, that's a really important part of their business. What really excited me, I guess, when we started talking to each other initially about the Deep Planet technology, was you were really clear on the problems or the questions, the couple of questions that you really wanted to get answered. You've touched on it a little bit in your first answer, but could you really talk about the two key questions that you came to Deep Planet with, and why it was going to be really important to be able to answer them at scale?
Yeah, I mean, the critical factors for us as a multi-regional wine business here in Australia is, when is the fruit going to be ready and how much is it there? So, you've got a vintage, which is this, rolling focus throughout the season to make sure you can get multiple regions into the winery in the best possible condition and produce the best possible wine from it. So knowing when it's going to be ripe is critical from not only a logistics point of view, but also a quality point of view. And also the tonnage of how much is going to be there is really critical from supply. Are you going to run short, or are you going to run slightly long? But also the logistics point of view comes in once again around how many trucks you're going to send to pick up that fruit. That is crucial in having a smooth vintage. And it's one of those things that when you've done a smooth vintage through an intake and a production focus, it's fantastic, and you want everything to be like that in the future. But we know that Mother Nature doesn't do that to us. So how can you best respond to that? And knowing how your intake process is going to work, regardless of what the weather is going to do, is really crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this year we obviously had a bit of a further stretched out vintage because of the cooler ripening conditions, but obviously in more recent years we've seen a lot more of that condensed vintage, and people sort of can be scrambling around like chicks with their heads cut off sort of thing, trying to make sure it all fits. Often just the thought of implementing new technology, I think a lot of people can go, oh no, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. And because it's actually that initial process of actually starting that often is the barrier to that. Can you talk to us a bit about your thoughts on the journey with Deep Planet, from sort of getting set up in the initial stages, having done it for a vintage now, what you think the next sort of step and challenge is for that whole customer journey, and what you liked about it, and what could continue to be improved, not just from a Deep Planet perspective, but perhaps from a larger and broader, ag technology perspective.
Sure. I mean, understanding clearly where we wanted to go. So having those two kind of clear questions that we wanted answered was a big help in terms of, formulating the path of how do we go through and select a vendor who we work with to partner with. So understanding what your outcome wants to be, and maybe for some people, it's just, I want to know how much is out there from a yield perspective. But for us, having the two tiers kind of drove that conversation down to some clear focus points. And it came down to, one, understanding the data that we had in our data set, and importance of that. We have a long, for a business that's been running for a number of years, we have a huge data set. Now, how can we best make use of that? Then the second point was, where are the gaps in that data, and what technology can we use to fill them? So in terms of, we have a very strong data set in some areas, it's slightly weaker in other areas. How can we get technology to fill that without having to send extra people out to the field and create extra resourcing issues at a critical time? So that's really important for us, that helped us come up and say, look, yeah, Deep Planet looks to be a group that we want to partner with to go forward, because they met both of those two criteria in terms of the data we had. Could they use it and produce an outcome from that? And also, what could they use in the way of technology to fill the second part of the discussion? So that's really important for us. And then just basically, was there someone in Australia that we could talk to in the same time zone? There's a range of other points that came into it. So all those things came together and made a very good process in terms of, selecting some blocks from around Australia that we want to use in our initial scope, which is good. We got the initial scope, came back with some very confident data in terms of the accuracy of that. But more in questions, there were some points raised in some of that initial scope, which also gave us further confidence that questions were going to be asked, but it's to find out more to get a better result versus oh, this has happened, we can't really explain it. So that gave us a lot of confidence. We embarked in that and used a range of blocks from around Southeast Australia, from where we pull fruit. So we had not only a multi-varietal look across the previous vintage here in 21, but also across multiple regions. So it's very important. Logistically, you can sometimes now, with the compression of vintage that you talked about before, Matt, that's when it becomes tough, when you have 2 or 3 regions going at the same time, competing for the same, quality version of tank space or press capacity or whatever. So it's really important to understand how that will work out across a wide range of areas. So that was very confidence inspiring. The deep plant could provide that sort of view to us.
Yeah, no, and so yeah, Deep Planet, those first steps were really important in terms of picking those initial blocks and doing the yield challenge with the maturity Beaumet heat maps that they've developed now. They're also offering a maturity challenge as well, so people can supply a little bit of data and then get back what the predictions would have been, which is really resonating with that whole "is it going to work for me" type question that people have. For myself as a business development consultant, I live by the mantra that people buy from people, and that it's more about why you do what you do rather than what you do as really important. And I often say that businesses should focus on their relationships even more than the capability of their solution. From a relationship driven perspective, your experience with Deep Planet and perhaps your expectations and experience you've had with other suppliers, what do you think from a technology supplier and multinational wine company makes for a successful partnership?
Well, one of the key points, Matt, is transparency. It's having that good enough relationship that you can be completely transparent and honest, and you can share the concerns that you've got from both sides, and that brings a lot of confidence to a relationship. So you can definitely build on that. And that's one of the things that we got with Deep Planet. It was very upfront and open from the start about what their technology could and couldn't do, and then how that would fit into our existing data set and resources that we had. So that was crucial for that. Also, in terms of communication, about how that was structured. Everyone says more communication's better, but communication for communication's sake is not always the best. But very much talking very to the point around the issues that we had, the process that we were going through, when there needs to be more data to clarify points. That was upcoming. Real timeliness in that data about exchange of where we need to go, because once again, we're doing this in the middle of vintage, so the sooner you get that information across, the better you can make decisions from that. So that was one of the things that was really crucial for us. Also, the fact is, when you came and said, we asked for this, but actually it'd be really good if we could find out this point extra. So things you talked about with the Beaumet heat maps around, why is this block particularly variable, or why are we having ripening issues with it? In the vintage you talked about being a little bit more drawn out here in 21, some real issues around some blocks, a couple of blocks really stalling. And when we went to Deep Planet and said, can you please tell me when these are going to unstall, or what are the factors behind that? There was a real collaborative discussion around that. So all those sorts of things give real focus to a project, but also give a lot of confidence that you are going in the right direction. And when you have stepped off the edge of the cliff in terms of embracing new technology, you are going to see some sort of return on investment from that, because the people you're working with really want to see the project succeed from an information base, versus just, we've sold this particular package and that's great, and you can speak to the person in customer service. There's a real being really embedded in the outcomes of what you're trying to do.
Perfect. From I think these initial questions have been great to provide a bit of context around, how things move forward, what we needed, what Deep Planet needed to do to get where they were. So that resulted in, as you said earlier, a multi-regional, multi-varietal sample project over the 2021 vintage, over 1,000 hectares. Can you just give us, without giving anything commercially secretive away, give us a bit of the high level results that you got that made an impact on the business?
Okay. I mean, everyone wants to talk about numbers. We're talking about yield. How accurate was it? So In terms of the overall package, looking across the different regions and varieties, 89% accuracy in terms of that estimation. In terms of when that started in the project, there was an initial cut that was done fairly early on, but that figure's taken close to harvest, when that kind of 7 to 14 days from harvest, which is crucial for us because that's when we're really having the discussion around logistics, and really that's where we're going to get the most efficiency from it. Of course, you always want to know earlier than that. That's one of those things as we continue to partner into the future, that accuracy will come, with a very early season cut and so forth. So from that point of view, that was fantastic. In terms of the other key thing that's really important to us is about when the fruit's going to be ready. So if you're looking at the comparison between the harvest day and what we call our optimum biome, is when the winemaker ideally would want that fruit picked. The date correlated very closely, so within the 0.22 of a bome to when the model was predicting, or the program was predicting, to when the fruit got picked at that particular bome. So a very good correlation there, which is something which is very exciting for us in terms of getting that, because once again that has the biggest contributor to getting some efficiency from an intake process, which obviously drives efficiency and cost savings.
Thanks, that's awesome. I guess the elephant in the room whenever people talk about agtech, and it's come up in numerous surveys around agtech adoption, is the ROI factors of new technology. I think you guys take a really open and curious approach to to looking at new technology, which is great. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you're looking to return an ROI. Can you tell us a little bit how you're potentially managing the ROI of the Deep Planet project internally, and what you see it now and also into the future delivering in that space?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, it's always one of those things when you're talking with all big corporates, which are very financially focused. What is going to be the return on investment? When are we going to get payback on this? And that's very important. And depending on how you extrapolate out the numbers, and whether you talk on a per tonnage basis or just an overall cost, you may see, depending on the season, and this is what is one of the tricky things around returning investment, is around, on this season we knew this, so we would have made this decisions. How do you actually look at comparing that between seasons? So, in some seasons you might only see a saving of $5 per tonne. In some you might see up to $55 per tonne. Now that's worked off some numbers extrapolated out from the trial that we did, so that's very, very a limited scope. But the other thing you have to remember to talk about is also the value of information and how key that is in terms of getting that out to people. So things like the BOMO heat maps about when the grower's going out to sample in the field. Can you actually get them to take a better BOMO sample? We do a 20 bunch sample for our BOMO testing from a better spot that's going to give you a better result. So once again, that's not only building the efficiency into the system, but also giving you a better data set to do that. Selective picking decisions, once again, from the BOMO heat maps for maintaining quality, so you can maintain the quality across the whole block, or possibly in some cases increase it. So all those sorts of things have to be talked about. So yes, there's a return on the investment, but there's also the value of the information and the dissemination of the information that drives in businesses. And like a lot of corporates, yes, it's very easy to count the dollars and the cents, but also the value of having people less fatigued and less stressed at vintage, because they have the information when they need it. They can plan appropriately, and it's not all the stuff which is made at the 11th hour in terms of decisions around picking and making sure people get the rest and the revilement that they need during vintage, because vintages are long.
Yeah, I really thought some of the I guess untangible ROI is really around that creating a team environment and being able to share that information. When the first BOMO heat maps came out this vintage, and you were showing, you said your winemaker was really excited about that opportunity, and it created perhaps a more cohesive working sort of partnership between the grower liaison and grower base and the winemaking team, because they could really see having a conversation driven by data rather than driven by anecdotal sort of evidence. Looking forward, I guess, agriculture is always a really interesting sort of thing. You know, as a tech company in other industries, you can keep developing and moving things forward and testing and releasing as often as you like throughout the year. But with ag, we sort of have two opportunities a year, one in the southern hemisphere and one in the northern hemisphere. So, you know, what is the process with Deep Planet and Pernod Ricard looking like and moving forward for the current vintage that's nearly underway in the northern hemisphere, and also coming back to Australia for 2022?
Okay, yeah, Matt, we are a global business. We do have operations in Europe, in China, and also in North America. So we're looking to, you know, roll out some of this technology in those areas and do a similar trial to compare this, especially in places like North America, which are going through some issues at the moment around droughts and how that's going to affect their current crop. And, you know, as the pressure comes on from things like, you know, climate change in terms of, you know, less consistent rainfall, and also things like smoke and so forth, frost events in other parts of the world, which have been pretty well recorded, to understand that from a greater picture. It also gives us the ability to do 2 trials in the same year. You get to harvest grapes once a year, but if we can do that in 2 hemispheres, that's also a benefit to us, to see if we can continue to focus and improve on making sure our processes are correct in terms of what data we need to collect and validating the technology, but also getting another set of results, which gives us confidence to continue moving forward in these areas.
Fantastic. I think sometimes the word sort of AI and machine learning and all these sorts of things sometimes, I guess, frighten or you know, concern people that it's not hugely you know, technologically advanced industry still, as much as we want to be pushing that. What would you say to people that are looking at these types of ag tech solutions now, and what their, you know, what their mindset should really be towards it?
Yeah, it's one of those things that can be very daunting. I'm lucky that I work with a really wide a team with a wide range of experiences and a wide range of success in these areas, and that gives you a lot of confidence to make decisions, because you can have those open table conversations. For perhaps a smaller player or someone that doesn't have that, you do have to kind of rely on your industry peers. But it's one of those things that you need to embrace this, because this is definitely an area which can add value to your business in terms of understanding, you know, the information that you have, how to better leverage that, but also how can you do what you do with a manual practice today better. So, you know, whilst there is a lot of, you know, concern around projects like AI, and we can see what happens in the kind of social media space, and there's a lot of a real fear around that, this is a genuine tool. It's a genuine tool to be able to use the same as any other tool that you've used more analogically in your business. You know, it's as good as a tractor and so forth to getting your job done. So it's one of those things about understand what your needs are, make sure you've done your research and it actually fits your needs the best, whether it be talking with your peers or talking with other like-minded people in the industry. And then, yeah, you need to make a step, and that first step can be quite small, but, you know, the longest journey in the world, you know, starts with one step. As soon as you commit to that and you head down a path, that's going to be beneficial to your business if you've done that work previously. So, yeah, don't be overwhelmed by the technology. Work out how the technology can work for you, and definitely try to embrace it into the future.
Yeah, I think it's you know, understanding, you know, we all use Google Maps now and these sorts of technologies, and we don't sort of question how they work in terms of using AI and so forth. I guess from a sort of as a question around data, and the importance of sort of starting now to clean up your data sets and so forth, so that, you know, when you really are, you know, quite happy and moving forward with the technology, the AI is working on a, you know, on a clean set of data, not getting 5 years down the track because Pernod or some other major corporate has sort of worked with the supplier and nailed the technology, but then you can't adopt it because your data that you're feeding into it is incorrect. What's your sort of thoughts around that process?
Yeah, look, it's one of those things, like people keep records, and a lot of people keep a lot of records, and maybe that data isn't great in terms of the clarity, but also what they've actually kept. So, you know, keeping data as a cost, make sure what you're keeping is what you need to be keeping for your outcomes, but also spend the time is, if you are going to record it, if you are going to keep it, make sure it's the cleanest it can be. So when you do want to now leverage that to drive your business forward, you're not spending a lot of time going through and making sure whether things are right. And, there's a lot of stuff that stays in people's heads and doesn't get written down. At least try and have an element set of truth in terms of your records, which makes these projects a hell of a lot easier. So, and typically something, like I said, vintage A happens once a year, so vintage records only get written down once a year. It's not something that gets looked at. Maybe you look at it once, make sure it's accurate, make sure it's clean, and make sure it's in a format that you can share with people. It does take a little bit of a cost to get that all locked down once, but if you do it right and do it properly once, you can use that on and on in a range of different projects.
Awesome. Well, that's sort of what we were going to cover in the chat. That was about the 25-minute mark, I think. So we've done well. We would have kept it in time. We normally obviously would have had questions at the event. We can't do that here now, but if people do have questions, feel free to connect with the team at Deep Planet, either via email at hello@deepplanet.ai or jump on the website. There's a lot of useful blogs and articles at deepplanet.ai. Alternatively, feel free to reach out to myself, who, as I said, is acting as a independent consultant as a market entry advisor for Deep Planet. Thanks very much for your time, Philip. Really appreciate you sharing all those insights. I'm sure a lot of not only growers but other ag tech suppliers watching this will be able to get some really useful information out of that, and we'll look forward to continuing to work together on this project.
Fantastic, Matt. Thank you for the time.
Excellent.